Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where actually you are in the world. My name is Joel, and this is PractiTest webinar around testing metrics. Welcome to everyone who just joined the call. Um, so I just want to tell everyone that we're recording this session. So if you were to have any questions at any point, please feel free to ask them first of all, and we will be reviewing questions at all times. And wait a second, just making sure that we can go over everything here. Just a question. Okay. In any case, so we're going to be recording this session, and we're going to be sending you a link that you can download and share with your teams once the session is over. So what I want to do is let's actually get started. So again, welcome to the session. The name of the session is basically how to avoid cutting yourself with the double-edged sword of testing metrics, and that's a very sophisticated title. The way that I see it, and I guess the way that I have been approaching metrics all of my life is basically how do we cope with the necessary evil of testing metrics, and this is what we're going to be going over the whole session. Okay, and again, you'll understand what I mean by necessary evil once we actually roll into that. But I guess that many of you already have an idea of what we're talking about. By the way, what I didn't get to say before, we're going to be having. Well, you know what? Let's actually. I think this is the next slide here. So what we want to cover today, it's basically we want to do the following. We want to go over the pros and cons of working with metrics. I'm going to be talking about that, meaning what is good about metrics, what is bad about metrics, where do you need to watch out for metrics, stuff like that. Then I want to talk about a point that I think it's cardinal for everyone who's working with metrics today, and that is how should you approach your metrics program. And I want to put emphasis on the word program because metrics is not a set of graphs, it's actually a program, something you want to achieve. So how to plan and how to maintain it. And then we'll talk about some tips and tricks that I have gathered out of my experience in metrics and, well, in testing general metrics in particular, on how to work with metrics internally and externally within your teams. And we will end by going over our questions and answer session. And if you have been part of this practice webinar in the past of any of the, I don't know, this is our eighth webinar. I was actually taking count earlier. Any of the last 7 webinars, you know that this is maybe the most important part because this is where people can go ahead and ask questions, can go ahead and, hey, tell us what you want to know, share with the rest of the people if you have anything to share. So you can use that Q&A in order to ask questions. Now, what I wanted to say is that you can start asking questions right now, okay? Wait a second. Okay, you can start asking questions right now. We will monitor those questions all the time, but we will answer them towards the end of the session. Okay, so just take that into account. Now, let's actually get started with what we want to achieve. Oh, sorry, forgot about that. First of all, a little bit of background. If you don't haven't been part of the session, you don't know me. A little bit of a background. I'm Joel. I've been a tester. I've been in testing for the last 19 years. I started as a tester on a very small startup. Grew into the profession. I have been a test lead, test manager, QA manager. Worked in very small companies, in very large ones as well. After I worked as a manager and director, I turned out to be a testing consultant and again speaker in some conferences. And after a couple of years, I started working in PractiTest. My work in PractiTest is basically to serve as 2 main hats. I am what is called the Chief Solution Architect in PractiTest, and that is one of the coolest jobs in the world. I get, first of all, to define what we want to see within PractiTest as kind of a product owner, but I also get to talk with customers all the time. How are they using the system? Do we have suggestions on how they could be using the system? Stuff like that. We get to talk all the times with testers, and that's pretty good. And the other thing that I do, it's I am the head of the testing team. And again, it's the testing team, even though we don't have a specific testing team, all of us do everything. But I manage all of the QA work. As you might have understood, we're actually an agile firm. So we have what is called functional teams in the system, but I'm still in charge of all testing operations. Now, I mentioned PractiTest a couple of times. So what is PractiTest? Many of you might already know. Some of you might already be working with it. But PractiTest is a very cool ALM solution. ALM stands for Application Lifecycle Management, and that basically means a QA management, test management system. What actually sets it apart, it's very intuitive, very simple, but on the other hand, we make it very methodological and flexible. So you will be able to match it to your needs, but not waste a lot of time doing that. It integrates very well with other systems: Jira, Jenkins, Pivotal Tracker, QTP, almost any automation tool. And again, just try those. We make sure to have the best support in the system. But again, that's everything that I'm going to say about PractiTest. So let's actually move into content right now. Now, before we even get started, I want to do a show of hands. Okay, I want to try to understand what kind of audience we have, what is your background, stuff like that. So, show of hands, guys. Please wait with your show of hands until we get started with it. Okay, I see that some people are already letting their hands up. Now, our show of hands is very simple. I want people to raise your hands if you in your company have a standard set of metrics. Okay, think about it. Do you have a standard set of metrics that you use either as a company, maybe as a team? It doesn't need to be company wise. Do you have metrics that you say, hey, yes, we're using these ones, this is what we're reporting on? So I just want to see how many of you actually have metrics in the system. Let me just check on this side of the client. Not many of you have. Oh, okay. Now people are answering. Go ahead, guys, answer. I want to see how many of you actually have metrics in the system. So judging from the people who are answering here, I guess that about a quarter of you have a set of metrics in your companies, and that's actually again, I thought that it would be more. I guess more people have metrics, not necessarily a set of metrics, but I guess it would have been more. But that's okay. Okay, we can actually build on that. Now I'm going to take your hands down right now, and the reason I'm going to take your hands down is because I have another question here, and this is a show of hands. Out of those guys who actually answered right now, or you know what, even out of those who don't have right now a set of metrics but had in the past, I want to know how many of you actually run into the situation where the metrics that you had actually caused more harm than help, okay, to your company. So again, either those of you who are working with metrics or those of you who worked in the past, how many of you actually found out that the metrics that you were using actually were more harmful than helpful? Okay, I'm looking at your replies right now. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else here? Okay, so it seems that about half of the people who had metrics actually are saying that in the past, where they were using metrics, those metrics could have been more harmful than helpful in the past. And you know what? This actually goes very well with my experience. I have worked with metrics. I think that since my second job as a QA manager, I made sure to have metrics everywhere where I actually used to work as a consultant, as a manager, or anything. And out of my experience, what I've seen is that about half the times, those metrics were actually harmful. Maybe not completely harmful, but they were causing some harm to the people involved. And I think that this is, on a sense, it's natural, it's to be expected, but it's also something that we can actually work against it. Okay, and we can actually plan our metrics in a way that will make them even less harmful than they are today. And I think that the reason that metrics are harmful actually come from this simple fact. Okay, just like knives, just like fire, TNT, salt, almost every tool that you can think about, metrics can be a great tool in good hands, but they can also be a very, very dangerous tool in the wrong hands. Okay, and if you look into the picture, what actually brought me to this picture is that the guy in the picture actually looks like the son of one of my best friends, and it's not him, but it's here. But guys, think about it. Fire, it was a very good invention at the beginning, but it can also burn you. Try to think about arrows. I was thinking about arrows earlier today, and the fact that arrows we actually invent, they actually, together with fire, arrows help us to build civilizations. We're able to hunt bigger animals. Look what we're doing right now with arrows. We're actually sending ballistic missiles to threaten or to do something countries against the other. We're basically killing ourselves with those arrows. So the same tools that can help us become more civilized can also help us to harm ourselves. And taking it a couple steps backwards or a couple steps back is the same with metrics. Okay, they are very good tools, but on the wrong hands, under the wrong impression, they can also cause a lot of harm. And let's actually talk a little bit about that. What I want to talk right now is go over the first part of the session that we want to talk. And I want to talk about the pros and the cons of working with metrics. Now, my wife always says that I'm the most positive guy she knows. So I'm going to start with the pros because my wife's always right. Um, and I'm going to start by pointing out that metrics is mainly the most effective means that we have of communication. Okay, it might be trivial, but I wanted to think about this a little bit more. It's very intuitive and to think that they can help us to communicate the status. Okay, are we there yet? How many bugs we have? Percentage of the application we've covered. But if you think about it, when you use metrics, you're also conveying to your testing team what's important to you and when do you want the efforts to be there. The simplest example, if you're going to be measuring how many bugs everyone's going to be reporting, they're going to be having more bugs in there. You're telling them it's important for you to report bugs. If you're measuring how many tests they have left at the end of the day, then you're telling them it's important for you to run as many tests as you can. So again, consciously or unconsciously, once you set up a metric, you're basically telling everyone in the team, hey, I'm measuring this. This is very important for me. Okay, so they're good when you want to tell what you're doing. They're also good when you want to communicate what you're thinking about. Now, metrics are also good because, well, they're usually clear. And by usually, I mean good metrics. If you write a good metric, if the metric is defined correctly, it's very, very clear. People will be very easy for them to understand it, to share it, to move over, to make their decisions, conclusions. It should be very, very clear. So that's why metrics are actually very good for us. Now, thinking about other stuff, metrics will help us to compare things. Okay, how do you compare apples and oranges? Well, if you have the right metrics, you will be able. What do you want to compare? If you want to compare nutritional value, you can compare apples and oranges. It's okay. If you want to compare mass or weight, if you have the right metrics, you can basically compare even different teams, even different processes. You're going to be able to do it. Now, if you have even better metrics, you're going to be able to compare between the same process at multiple times or multiple versions. Hey guys, how are we doing right now? You can tell it like, okay, this is our current status, but if we look into how we were on the last 3 versions, we're actually on a good chance of meeting our schedules, or we're not at a good chance of meeting our schedules because we learn from history. Okay? So when you benchmark, when you compare, you're going to be able to reach a lot more conclusions, not only about what's going right now, but when you compare it to other things or to past things. Now, metrics, obviously, they help us to track progress. Are we there yet? It might be very easy to say you're not there yet, but do you know when are you going to be there? Do you need to make predictions? Do you need to make corrections? Many times, I know my development managers will come and say, hey, where are we? Are we going to be there yet? If not, then what do we need to make? What do we need to do? Where should I put my development efforts to make sure that we meet those deadlines? Okay, so all of these are things that you will be able to provide value to your company if you have the right metrics for that. Okay. Um, Metrics are easy to distribute. Okay, they're short, they're concise. You can create a one pager, send them to someone by email. You can publish it on a kitchen monitor and make sure that whenever someone goes to make coffee, then they will see those metrics in there. Okay, they're very easy for you to make sure that everyone's actually looking at that. And the last one in my list here is that people tend to like metrics. Okay, people, even managers, guys, even managers, these guys tend to like metrics. And yes, I'm kind of insinuating that managers are not real people. They like metrics, and they like it because they're concise, because they're actionable. We're going to be talking about that because it's easy for them to understand it and to grasp what you're trying to tell them. Okay, so in a nutshell, metrics are good. Just like a knife is good when you're preparing dinner, metrics are good when you're working on any type of process and project, especially a software or hardware development project. And as a QA manager, and I guess that I wanted to talk about this before, but I haven't. As a QA manager, metrics are one of the best tools that we have in order to convey the information that we want to convey. Okay, remember, guys, the job of us as QA people is not to test. Test is a tool. Our job as QA people is to provide information to stakeholders so that they can make their decisions. We need to be able to tell developers what do they need to develop and what do they need to fix. We need to tell our executives if we're going to be making the deadlines or not, and where are the problems. We need to be able to answer those questions that are critical for them. And one of the best ways of answering those questions, other than coming to their doors and knocking and saying, hey, this is the status, is by having the right set of metrics and pushing it to them so that they can actually make those decisions. Okay, so metrics are your friends, but on the other hand, metrics are also something that you need to take a very good look into. And that is because, in addition to all the pros that we have on metrics, there are a number of cons. Okay, there are things that we need to be aware of because metrics can also be used against us in a court of law. Okay, like I haven't been arrested, but I see movies and series. They're reading you your rights, and they tell you whatever you said might be used against you in the court of law. It's the same with metrics, and many times this is what's happening. You said something, and it's gonna come back to bite you. Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, first of all, it's important to understand that intrinsically, people don't like being measured. Okay, I want you to take a second to read the Dilbert that I had in here. I actually got it about 2 weeks ago. Gonna keep quiet. Okay. So the pointy hair boss is coming and saying, "Hey guys, we're gonna start monitoring employee productivity in real time. Anyone has any questions?" And so Dilbert comes and asks a question that everyone was thinking about. Hey, I need a clarification here. Are you saying that you remove the last shred of human dignity from our jobs and you reduced us to nothing but meat machines that suffer in the state of perpetual inadequacy as each person is compared to an arbitrary and ever growing goal until there's no realistic way for the employee to find happiness through natural means? Pointy hair guy comes and says, "Yep, that's one way to look at it." And guys, this is the biggest fear of metrics. Okay, people fear being measured because you dehumanize them. Once you start measuring them, you say, "Hey, I don't care about context. There's no more excuses. I'm gonna measure you just like we did on the Industrial Revolution. I'm gonna measure you based on how many boxes you fill out, and if you don't fill enough boxes, I'm gonna take you out because I don't care about you. I don't just care about what you're producing." Okay, so people don't like it. I don't like it. It's trivial to say that people don't like it. So this is one of the biggest fears that you have when you're working in metrics. And I have actually seen this in practice. You try to implement metrics on the systems, and people say, "No, we don't want it. We don't need it. We're good enough as it is." And it is because of this. So take this into account. By the way, for those of you who don't know Dilbert, go ahead and look it up, dilbert.com. It's if you're on the IT business, development business, you need to know that this guy's hilarious, and he sent you by email every day a joke, and it's actually pretty good. Okay, but I'm digressing. Let's go back into metrics. Now, a very problematic point of metrics is that any metric, regardless of the one that you're using, any metric in by itself will tell you only one side of the story. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we're in a session right now and someone comes and tells you that what we see in front of you is the biggest problem that we have in the system. Okay, it's absolutely problematic. The system is not going to be able to be released on time. We have too many issues with this, as you can obviously see out of this screen that you can have in there. And everyone should actually be working on this screen right now and on nothing else. Okay, everyone should concentrate only on this part and on this part only. And you're the manager and you're hearing that, and all of a sudden someone else comes from the other side of the desk and says, "This guy is absolutely wrong. This is the biggest issue that we have in the system. No one should be looking to the other one because of this and this and this. If we don't take care of this right now, nothing's going to work. And we need to go ahead and handle it right now. And I don't care what the other guy is saying. Everyone should actually be working in here." And what's happening is that this guy is showing this metric here, this other guy is showing this other metric here. And in reality, what's happening is actually that what they're talking about is this. Okay? First metric was actually looking at it from the Y angle. Second metric was looking at it from the X angle. This is this one. This one is looking at it from the Y angle. And what happens is that it's very hard for you from only one angle to paint the complete picture. Okay, and this only schematic, obviously, but this is what happens a lot of times when you're working with metrics. Someone is telling one part of the story, another person is telling another part of the story. And unless you actually have the perspective, it's going to be very hard for you to make the whole picture, to paint the whole picture and to understand that, well, this is the complete problem, this is the way that we should handle it. okay? Or this is the complete status of our product. This might be something good. This might be something bad. So this is how the whole product looks like. So one metric individually is going to cause more harm than help. And that is why I'm talking about metric systems all the time and not about a single metric. Now, so this is important to know, but I think that the most problematic point of metrics is that metrics, regardless of what you want to do, will end up being used by managers. Okay, and guys, I'm a manager myself, so I can make joke of myself. I'm also a Latino, so I can tell jokes about Latinos and stuff like that. But this is only part joke. It's a lot true, and even if you're a manager, take it lightheartedly, because well, metrics are going to be used by managers, and some of our managers are gonna be people who think that their personal experience is actually valid in every situation that they're facing. Okay, so they're looking at a metric, they're saying, "Hey, I've seen this in the past. Go ahead and do this and this and this." Okay, this is the first part that is bad. You might also be working with a manager who tends to jump to conclusions without actually waiting to listen to all the information. You only started to telling him what you're finding. He's only seen part of the data, and he's already running, blaming and telling and saying what you should do. Again, not even giving you time to go ahead and work with that. So he's looking into only part of the metrics and just jumping into conclusions and basically ruining everything. Um, Other problems might be that you're working with a manager who basically forgets that problems in paper are easier to solve than those in the real world. And so you come and say, "Hey, we're not going to meet the schedules." And he just comes and says, "I don't care. Right now, go ahead and put everyone in the team to work on that problem and that problem only." It sounds easy enough, but you cannot do it, meaning only teaching the people what they need to do and leaving what they're doing on the side is going to be more problematic. So trying to have quick fixes and magic solutions, it's not something that will work. And this actually takes us to our next problem. Many managers like applying quick fixes. You have a complex solution, go ahead and quick fix it. It always brings to mind Marie Antoinette and the French Revolution when they came and told her, "Hey, people are complaining they cannot buy bread," and she went out and said, "So let them eat cookies or cake, I think it is." And there's no quick fix for a complex issue, okay? And that's one of the problems. People tend to see metrics, they oversimplify what they're seeing, and they try to say, "Hey, go ahead and solve the symptom," and not so much the problem. If you have too many open bugs, go ahead and close them. Well, yeah, right. And last problem that I'm going to mention here is that many people believe that what they see in the metrics can tell them all the information they need to know. And as it usually happens, metrics, regardless of how good you are at them, will only tell you part of the problem. And there's still going to be the need for having a manager saying, "Hey, on top of that, there's this and this and this," or if you take all of that together and I see it from that way or that way. Many times you send someone an email with all the metrics you want to talk about, and before you even have the meeting, they're telling you, "Hey, go ahead and do this and this and this," and basically that's a recipe for disaster. So it's not the metrics that are bad, but it's the fact that someone doesn't know how to use them that is making the whole situation worse. Okay, so I know up to now I've painted a very great picture. Let's actually try to think how you can take all this information and actually build something good out of it. Okay, so I want to talk about here about the next step. Okay, so if you take all of that into account, if you understand the good and the bad of metrics and measurements in general, how can you do it? Meaning, what do you need to do in order to plan and to maintain a good metrics program? Okay, and I want you to hold that thought, because before we go into that, I want to share with you something. We can call it something personal. Um, yeah, it sounds weird, but it's personal because I have been developing this for the last couple of years out of experience, as I was telling you, working with a lot of practice customers, going over their metrics, their measurements, their work habits, and basically trying to think with them how stuff works. And I came up with what I call the loss of metrics, or the loss of conservation of metrics. And my wife always tells me to apologize because I'm such a geek. But if there's an audience where I can actually be a geek, I think it's this one. So I'm going to apologize, even though I hope that I don't need to apologize with you guys. So if you know about the loss of conservation of motion, or the loss of conservation of momentum, or conservation of mass, it's something similar to that. And let me explain to you what I mean about the loss of metrics, or the loss of conservation of metrics. The first law says that everything that you measure will improve over time. Okay? And that's basically a human behavior. If you start measuring stuff, if someone tells you that we're measuring something, you will improve it. Okay? If, as I said before, if we're going to start measuring the amount of bugs that people are reporting, then the number will actually go up. If we will start measuring the number of times that bugs are rejected by development, okay, they will start going down because whenever you report a bug, you will run to developers, or even before you report a bug, you will go to the developer to make sure that it's not rejected. If we're going to measure how many tests you write, you're going to start writing shitty tests. Sorry for saying that, but let's say bad tests, but they will go up. Whatever you measure will improve, and by improve I mean go up. Okay, so that's the first law of metrics, and that's something to understand. So make sure that you measure only what you want to improve, and make sure that you measure it correctly. But I'm actually going before my time. Second law of metrics, I think it's a little bit more interesting. Whenever something improves, this improvement will be at the expense of something else that will worsen accordingly. So I kind of mentioned that before. If we're going to be reporting the amount of bugs, then the quality of the bugs will go down. If we're going to be measuring the amount of rejections, then maybe the quantity of bugs will go down. So you need to try to think about your project, your process, whatever you're trying to measure, as a blanket. You can just pull it on one side, but then your legs will be out. And if you pull it to your legs, then your head will be out. And you need to understand how it works, because anything that is measured, anything that is improved, actually will come at the expense of something. And it reminds me of, I used to have a saying in one of the companies where I worked at, that someone wants to have a cafe latte that has a lot of sugar, a lot of milk, a lot of coffee, and also make it diet. You need to give up on one place. You cannot have it all. Okay? Now, another thing that you need to understand here is, and this is something that came actually empirically, you can only measure 5, sometimes it's only 3 aspects of anything that you're working on. The more complex the whatever you're working on, the project, the operation that you're working on, it will be less stuff that you can measure. Trying to measure more than that will lead to confusion and failure. Okay, it will make your trying to measure more, then it's either irrelevant metrics, or you're going to be measuring so much that people don't know where to actually work. People won't know what you're actually measuring them. It won't be clear to them what you want them to do. So if we combine 1 and 2 and 3 here, we understand that even us defining metrics, as much as we would like to go ahead and do it, we need to be very careful and very smart at what we're measuring at. Okay, because we need to be very picky. The third one, I actually want to whenever I think about it, I imagine it as one of those cartoons when you have, like, I think it's Daffy Duck is walking next to a dam, and all of a sudden there's like a hole in the dam. Water starts pouring, so he puts one finger on it, and then another hole starts pouring. He puts another finger on it, and then another hole, and he puts his foot on it. But you run out of stuff very quickly, and the dam will explode. So make sure that you only have small number of places in there, or fix it correctly. Now, so this is basically something that we need to take into account whenever we are creating our metrics. The last of the laws of the conservation of metrics actually not so related to the ones that we have in here, and so I put a line between it. And it comes to tell that metrics will become ineffective after a number of iterations. Okay, and if you know about the pesticide paradox, it's very much like this. If we measure the same thing over and over and over again, if we're measuring something, it's because we want to improve something, but that's something. After a while, it will be irrelevant to continue measuring that. Okay, so metrics, just as our pesticide paradox or test automation, stuff like that, you need to shift them here and there sometimes. Okay, and there's no unified theory of metrics, but again, more or less, these are my laws of conservation of metrics. And again, they have come from the last, I don't know if it's 3, 4, or 5 years, from working with a lot of customers and just recording this information to try to make sure that we get all that stuff back. But why did we talk about the laws of conservation of metrics? Why did we talk about why metrics are bad? We actually talked about them because I want to talk to you on how should you plan your metrics program so that it's actually effective, and so that whenever you're actually doing it, you're going to be reaching the results that you want to go for. Okay? So there are a couple of steps about how should you go ahead and plan it, and I'm going to talk about them right now. First of all, you need to define what are the objectives of your metrics. Meaning, it's not like trivial. Well, everyone's going to measure bugs. Yeah, but what are you going to measure from the bugs? Everyone will measure tests, but what are you going to measure from the test? Everyone will measure load, but what are you looking to measure with load? Okay, so start first of all by understanding who's your audience. And I've mentioned this in a couple of our past webinars. It's important to understand that you're not testing for testing itself. You're testing in order to provide your audience information. Uh, it might be your management. Hey, are we going to be able to release on time? Sure, that's one audience. It might be your team. It's important for me to tell you that you need to put more efforts on running more test cases or automating more or reporting better bugs. Okay, so you're also having metrics for your team. It might be your end users. Many times I release products where you need to tell them, hey, this is the load that any server on this configuration can actually take on, and those are metrics. It might be regulation. I've worked on a number of FDA regulated projects, and there was kind of metrics that we needed to have. It might be even be HR, and how many of you haven't been on that place where you need to provide every 6 months or every year qualifications or metrics-based qualifications if you want to give a raise to one of your testers, or they'll tell you, hey, we need to cut back on 10% of the team. Which 10% do you want to cut back? And if you don't want to cut back, show me that there are stars. Okay, so you're going to be having a lot of audience here, and you need to make sure that you're having good metrics and good measurements for each one of your audience here. And just as with the case of the blanket, one blanket won't be enough for each one of them because everyone will have different needs. Okay, so once you understand that you have different people in your audience, you need to understand that each of them will need different information to make their decisions. And the only way to provide different information to everyone is to have different metrics for each one of them. Okay? So first thing that you need to take out of here, if you're going to make your metrics, you're going to have different audience and everyone will need their own different metrics. Okay? So don't try to have one set of metrics that answers everyone's needs because it won't happen. Now, once you define your audience and you understand that for each of them you need to give them different information, you want to make sure that you have the right metrics for what they want to do. So start by thinking what information they want to gather, but use a couple of tools to make sure that you have the right metrics. The best tool that I like to use here, actually there are two that I'm going to talk about. One of them is the 5 whys. Okay, 5 whys is a method of asking why a number of times until you actually reach the bottom, the core need of what you're looking for. For example, let's say that you say, hey, I want to go ahead and measure how many bugs did I find in my process. Why do you need to measure how many bugs you find in the process? Well, because I want to see if my process has a good quality. So you ask, why does the bugs that you're actually finding is going to give you that information and say, you know what? No. So I want to go ahead and measure the bugs that are escaping my process. Okay, so the first why said that's not the bugs that I'm finding. I actually want to find the bugs that are outside. And you say, hey, why does it finding the bugs that are outside going to help you tell you if your process inside was good enough? So you go ahead and think about it a little bit more and you say, hey, you know what? It's not only the bugs that are outside. I want to see the bugs that are outside, but those that I think that I should have been able to find during my process. So by asking why a number of times, you get to refine the actual metric that is what you're looking to find. Okay, because many times the first metric that you come up with, it's going to be close enough, or it's going to be close but not close enough. So you want to continue asking yourself, working with your team to say, is this exactly what we want to measure? Is this what we want to see that we want to have in the process? And the same goes for load. We want to measure load. Why do you want to measure load? Oh, we want to measure load because we had problems last time and we actually implemented some new functionality. What type of functionality did you implement? Why do you want to measure load? Oh, because we implemented functionality so that whenever people are actually logging into the project, it takes less resources in order to log in. So what type of load do you want to measure? Oh, we actually want to measure log when people are logging into the system. Okay, and when do you want to actually go ahead and measure that? Let's actually do the 8 a.m. scenario when we have a peak of users logging into the system. So you're able to refine your measurements and you're able even to get better tests that you want to have in there. Now, so this is one of the tools that we have. The other tool actually mentioned it, I think at least in another one of our webinars, and this is passing our metrics through the SMART test. SMART is obviously basically the names of what we want to see, and we want to make sure that every one of our measurements of our metrics answers these criteria. It should be simple. Again, you shouldn't need a whole book to understand what you're seeing. It should be measurable. Okay, measurable, it's a metric, so it should be measurable in numbers, in something that actually is concise. It should be actionable. Actionable means that once I see this metric, I will know what I need to do. Okay, it's not okay, so we have load problems, what do I need to do? No, the load problems are in these and these and these places, and go ahead and you will know how to fix it. It should be repetitive. You should be able to run the same, provide the same metric week after week after week. And that information, that metric should also be timely. It should come at a time where your stakeholders can actually take action on that. If you tell them that you have load issues after the version is over, then it's not timely, right? So you should be able to provide that information on a timely basis. So start by thinking about metrics, first of all, by using the 5 whys, trying to understand, okay, is this exactly what I wanted to have? And once you have those metrics, make sure that they answer the SMART criteria. And if they answer the SMART criteria, then you're going to be able to, again, start working with it. Now, another thing that it's important when we start planning our metrics is not to look only within our process. We should try to look further than that. We should try to look after our, even in places that are not in our territory, because many times the information about how do we do, we will be able to find it only in other places, only in a second degree, if you want, of information. And so I'm talking about the need of looking at other places, and I've mentioned some of these. And again, these are examples of metrics that you might want to use that are not the trivial ones, like bugs found and test run. And one of them is actually escaping defects. And I mentioned this very quickly, but let me explain what it means. Escaping defects basically comes to measure how many or even what percentage of the bugs found overall in the process were actually found by your users. Some people refined it and they say, okay, so I want to divide, let's say, these are basically the bugs that are being reported from your support after the product has been out. So let's say that you release the product, you wait 6 months, you might wait a whole year depending on your life cycle. And then you start saying, okay, so these are all the bugs that came from support. Then you can refine those escaping defects and catalog them into 2 groups. Those that you found during the process and someone said, hey, we don't need to fix them right now, we can actually fix them later. And those that you were not aware of at all. Okay, and so say, well, the first part are those where maybe the QA should have been more aggressive, maybe product management actually did wrong by not fixing them. The second part actually is tested, we need to do better. Okay, or environments, we need to start testing, stuff like that. So this is one of the measures. It comes from information that you come from support. Another one is actually within our realms in the testing team, but it's not on the system itself. We should wait until the session is over, once our tests are done, and start looking at our rejected defects and also catalog them. Why are bugs being rejected? Okay, maybe why are bugs being ping-ponged between development and QA? And that is because there's a lot of wasted time in here. Are we rejecting defects because we're reporting a lot of duplicate bugs? So let's make sure we don't report a lot of duplicates. Maybe the people from the outsourcing team doesn't know how to write correct bugs and the development is not able to reproduce them. So we need to improve there. Maybe we have a lazy developer who, whenever we report a bug, he's saying, hey, it's not a bug, go ahead and try it again. And only the second time they get it, they start fixing them. And I've seen this in the past. So there's many, many reasons why we waste a lot of time unnecessarily. And so we can track rejected defects. For those of you working on SaaS system or hosted systems, you can look into server exception levels. And this is a very cool way of working. And again, those of you working on DevOps should know this by heart right now. You release the product, sometimes you do A/B testing, sometimes you do what is called limited release, and you put it only on part of your servers, and you start looking at server exception levels. Every server will have exceptions. But the question is, how many, what percentage, what amount of exceptions are we having? Is the current version better than the last version? Okay, it's kind of escaping defects, but statistic. Okay, so we're expecting to see X level of exceptions. We're seeing more than that. Okay, we have a problem, let's take it back, roll it back, fix it, go over that. Okay, so this is something that is very important to work with right now. And for those of you who are not working SaaS, similar to escaping defects, we can also see support calls post-release. Okay, I used to work on a project, it was a while back, no SaaS in there. We used to measure the first 3 months after a product is being released, and we were measured the amount of support calls that our support will get. And obviously, at the beginning, when you release a product, it will start having a lot of support. tickets, and then as the people know the product more, then they go down. But all of these are examples of metrics that you can do after the fact. Okay, and by the way, we're running a little bit late, so I'm gonna start running because we need to go over to the Q&A section. So sorry for that. Now, so we talked about planning. It's not only about planning. We need to understand that metrics are something that will change just as your project is being changed all the time. So you need to think about metrics maintenance. Okay, you should constantly be reviewing your metrics for accuracy and relevancy. Accuracy is very simple. Make sure that what you're seeing in your numbers feels and is similar to what you're seeing in fact, in reality. Okay, so make sure that your data is accurate. You can do cut analysis and do deep down analysis to look into that. Make also sure that it's relevant. Okay, make sure that people are still using that. Make sure that you don't need to go over more stuff. As your project and as your technology and as your people will change, so will your metrics. Okay, so all the time, make sure that they're constantly reviewed and they're relevant and accurate. Now, I mentioned this in the past. You need to go ahead and change your metrics once in a while. Bugs and people learn to work around them. The application is being modified, as we said, all the time. If you see that a metric is all the time green, 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 it's not very relevant anymore. Go ahead and look for another one in there. Okay, and it's also very important. Don't fall in love with your metrics. Be ready to change them even halfway during your project. If you understand at the middle of your project that your metric is not contributing, that you could make something else that is better, that is different, but again, you don't want to have too many metrics, make changes. Okay, you should go ahead and feel free to make those changes because at the end of the day, metrics should serve you and not serve their own purposes. Okay. Now, moving forward, and again, very briefly, let's go over tips and tricks. And then I want to, by the way, I see some questions that people are already asking. If you have questions about what we talked about right now, go ahead and ask them. And I also see a comment here about apologizing when we talk about the geek stuff. Thanks for the person who actually wrote that. It means a lot to us. Tips and tricks about metrics. Now, the first of them, regardless of what your mother told you in high school, presentation is as important as content. It's not only about who you are, it's about how you look, okay, especially in metrics. Your management, your developer are going to be looking into that and saying, yes, first of all, is it something that I like the graphs in it? And if yes, then they will go into the data. Obviously, if everything's red, it doesn't really matter how the graphs looks, but make an effort, make sure that your metrics look good because we're in a static race. Okay, we like things that look nice, so make sure that your metrics also look nice because you need to have them. Now, another thing that I've said, and I'm going to say it a couple more times. Wait, where am I? Here I am. You need to have different metrics for different people. The metrics that you're going to be sharing with your manager, with your CEO, are going to be completely different from the ones that you're going to be sharing with your team, and they're going to be absolutely different than the ones that you're going to be sharing with your end users. Okay? There's no way that you might be able to reuse one or two of those. But most of the time, for each one of them, you will need to have different metrics because they have different needs. They have different information needs, and they want to see different stuff. Okay, so make sure that you answer each one of their needs individually. Another tip or another trick that you need to have is to try to capture more data than you need today. Okay, you may need it later. Now, this is a tricky one. How much is enough? Well, I don't know. How much can you? Many times, if you can have logs and then parse those logs is good enough. Many times you want to have statistics about stuff that you have in there. As long as it's not taking more of your team to do that, go ahead and capture the data. In the end of the day, someone will come and say, hey, by the way, what about this and this metric? It's great if you can tell them, I don't have it right now, but give me until tomorrow morning, you'll have the actual data in there because I captured it. Many times the problems with metrics is that we can only start performing them from today and onwards because we don't have the data backwards. So try to have that data. It might be handy afterwards. Another very important tip, provide an analysis of your result with every graph. Add a sentence saying this and this, the conclusion of this graph is this and this and this. As you can see, this and this and this. Why? Don't trust that people will understand what they see. You don't know who's going to be seeing that. You don't know what your boss is going to be thinking about. You don't know from what meeting he or she came before. So go ahead and add that analysis. It might be a sentence, it might be a paragraph. It will save you a lot of time. Okay, every graph, every metric that you have in there, add another sentence, what they're seeing in there. Okay, it's just like in the news in the paper. You will have underneath something saying what you're having there, even though if it's trivial, it will pay off. Almost there, guys. I see some questions, so we'll start answering very, very shortly. Um, it's important to provide always different angles. As we saw from the picture, it's not only about how many bugs are you reporting, but maybe how many rejections are you having there. If you're having too many rejections and too many bugs, then something is bad. If you're running too many test cases but not finding any bugs in there, that might also be bad. Okay, so try to provide as many angles as you can in order to draw a complete picture. But on the other hand, don't give too many metrics because they will confuse your story. Okay, when you're creating a metrics diagram or you're creating a metrics dashboard, you're basically telling a story. You're actually conveying information. And as every story, if you add too much data into it, if you tell too much on it, then it will be confusing. Sometimes it's better not to add so much data. If someone asks for it, then give it up. Sorry, don't give it up, give it to them. But try to provide as little information that will convey as much of that information as that status in there. Okay, keep it short, keep it simple, keep it focused. Don't put too much info; it will only mess things up. And the last one in our tips and tricks section is to push your metrics. Don't make people ask for them. They won't be relevant by the time they ask for them. If you have graphs, send them by email. If you have dashboards, place them somewhere everyone will see. You have a coffee or water corner, put it in there. Get a television set, put it in there, and make sure that whatever you have, that information is going to be published in there. Everyone should be able to see it. Even if people say, "Hey, it annoys me. I'm coming here to drink coffee. I don't want to see metrics." Don't listen to them. They want to see it. And if you have something important to say, they will see it there and they will have actions in there. So metrics should be pushed. You shouldn't wait for someone to ask for them. Okay? So guys, this is more or less what I wanted to talk about. Let's go. Whoops, sorry, I didn't fix the developers testing do's and don'ts. Don't look into that. Let's say that we're talking here about metrics, and let's do metrics Q&A. And I'm going to go over here to the questions that I have. Wait a second. Guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. So I have here a question. Let me go over it. Okay, so the question here is, I'm new to QA and I'm wondering if you have some examples of metrics that you have used to convey to management what the risk is to release a product today. That's a great question. And it really depends. I think that if you see there's a risk about releasing a product today, it would come from one of two main angles, even three. The first of them is stuff that you know that it's there and should be fixed. Okay, so the trivial one, the most trivial one, how many showstopper bugs do we have in the database right now? Okay, so if you have too many showstopper bugs, well, it's trivial that you need to go ahead and fix them. There's one that it's a little bit less trivial than that, and that is discovery rate for showstoppers. Okay, it's not only about the snapshot of how that database looks today. One of the things that are more informative is, hey, how many bugs are we finding today? And out of those bugs, how many of those are showstoppers? If you're able to say, again, let's imagine that you have here a graph, okay? And let's imagine that today you're finding 10 showstopper bugs. And tomorrow you'll find 10 showstopper bugs. And the day after tomorrow you'll find 11 showstopper bugs. Then it comes to reason, then the day after tomorrow you will find around 10 or 11 bugs, and day after tomorrow you'll find another set of bugs, and until you start seeing a gradual decrease, then this is what you're going to be finding. Given that you test the same amount of test cases, given that you're still running the same type of test cases, then that's one of their biggest indications. It's not only number of bugs today, but discovery rate on the one hand. Another thing that it's a very big showstopper for me, it's the amount of test cases that we still need to run. Okay, how many test cases have we run? How many haven't we run? Okay, just to give you an idea, whenever I see a graph about test execution coverage, some people tend to look only at the failures. I look at the failures, obviously everyone does, but I also look at how many of the test cases I wanted to run I haven't run yet. Okay, because out of those are the bigger risks. Okay, are the things that I don't know if I'm going to have a bug there or not. then all of those are things that are going to convey the risk that you have in there. Now, having said that, be prepared. Once you tell someone, hey, I wanted to run right up to now 100 test cases and I have only run 50 of those, the first question will be, how come you haven't run the other 50? So make sure to have a good answer for that, and make sure that that answer is not, hey, I was lazing around and I didn't get to it. You should come and say, well, we actually run them, but they have been failing 3, 4, 7 times, so they have been blocking other parts of the system. And this is the risk. The risk is that we're running the same test time and time again because we're not able to move forward to test the other parts of the system. Okay, so those are the kinds of metrics that will come and provide that information. But again, don't show only snapshots. Try to go ahead and show also progress graphs and things that will help you to make a projection. Okay, if things are looking this way right now, this is how they will continue looking in the future. Okay, so that's one question. There's another question here, and it says, metrics are usually clear, but what happens if they're not clear to everyone and we actually get tons of questions out of people? Well, I talked about this a little bit, but let's move back into that again. Let me just minimize this a second. And we're talking about this guy in here, okay? So there might be two reasons why you're getting asked all sorts of questions. Maybe you thought that your metrics were clear enough, but they're not. And if they're not, then you may want to put that level of analysis, that small paragraph, that legend saying, this is what we're finding in there. So that's one of the things. Another problem might be that your data is not accurate. People are actually saying, hey, that doesn't look right. I don't understand it because it doesn't convey what I'm seeing in reality outside. So make sure that whatever you're doing in there, it's real. It's actually showing people what they have in there. Okay, so it's important to, first of all, make sure that, again, don't take it for granted. People will understand what they see. They usually don't. Okay, so it's important for you to come and provide that information for them. Okay, and the second one, again, be open to the fact that maybe your metrics are wrong. And if they are, no sin, just go ahead and fix them, and make sure that from now on they will be okay. Okay, there's another question in here. Just read it very quickly. Can you share any generic metrics to report on the Agile SDLC or development lifecycle? I'm looking for some leading and lagging indicators to measure quality of deliverables, project status, resources, and release readiness. I don't really think, and again, we work Agile in PractiTest, and I don't really think that there's a very huge difference between agile and non-agile. By the way, I see a huge difference between companies who have DevOps and companies who don't have DevOps. Okay, but if you're only talking here about agile, the question is about agile. How should we measure agile differently? It's not that different. Well, maybe instead of talking about the amount of bugs that you're finding per area, you might want to measure the amount of bugs that you're finding per user story. Okay. Agile shops tend to be very, very automatic. So you may want to provide sanity results where you're saying, hey, I'm looking here at the daily build. So unless my daily build actually is pass, or again, the number of the percentage of pass that you have is not going to be good enough, then go ahead and work on that. But I think that the biggest problem that people tend to have when they work in Agile is that you start having less and less formal structured test cases, and you have more and more exploratory testing cases, if at all. So try to make sure that you're still recording stuff. By the way, another problem that there is in Agile, people don't report bugs anymore. Okay, bugs are being fixed on the spot. So you know what? Report bugs, even if only as a one liner in an Excel sheet. Again, I don't like Excel sheets. You can use practice for that, by the way. But try to still capture your bugs. Try to still capture the test cases that you're running, even informally, because you still need that information. If you don't track that information, if you're only going by hearsay of the developers, then you're going to run into issues. Okay, and look into that information. And even if you're running Agile, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't document. It means that you need to document all the stuff that it's needed. Um, Last question here, guys, and I apologize for that, but I'm being given here smoke signals that we need to finish right now. Any tool that you recommend to make metrics? To the person who asked this, you should look to make metrics based on the tool that you're using right now. If you're using any management software that doesn't have the ability of creating metrics, then look for one that has the ability to create metrics, meaning metrics is one of the most important parts of reporting. If you're not able to take the outputs of your test cases and create graphs that you can send share with your team, then you should have a problem in there. If you're telling that, hey, we're working with Excel, so well, go ahead and create it using Excel. In the past I've used Excel sheets for making pretty good metrics. There are some commercial systems where you can input Excel sheets or spreadsheets or CSV files and create nice looking graphs and tables. But I think that again, I would put my money on finding a system that helps me to convey or lead the whole software development project, the whole testing project, and have those metrics come built in from there. Okay, you shouldn't work hard. Remember, metrics should be updated live. So if you're going to be using another system to take data out and take data in and then create those metrics, you're losing a lot of valuable time. Okay, so again, if you need recommendations on that, send me an email and we can basically take it offline. But I would try to look for a management system that actually has metrics built in. Okay, guys, we don't have time for additional questions. So first of all, again, 2 words about PractiTest. Um, Go and check it out. We have a pretty cool site on that. We also have the QA blog in PractiTest. A lot of things that what I've said today are also going to be shared in there. So you can also take a look into that. And again, if you have any questions at all, this is my personal email address. It doesn't go to a mailing list. It goes to myself and to my phone if you want. Send any questions you have in here. I will go over all of them and answer any other questions that you have. Take into account we will be sending the recording of today's session also via email. I don't think that today, maybe tomorrow, but you will get it. You can share it with everyone else in your company. And again, thank you very very much for your time. I hope that the session was valuable. And again, I guess that we'll be meeting. I think it's going to be next year on the next one of our PractiTest webinar series. So have a great day, guys. Have a great holidays and we'll be in touch with you afterwards. Thank you very much. This is Joel from PractiTest saying goodbye.